Greetings, ghosts and ghouls, and welcome to Bad Boo, a podcast conjured for the curious, where we explore all things frights, flicks, and folklore.
We are your haunting hosts, Sam and Jodie, guiding you through every episode of occult exploration and holding your hand the whole way through.
So if you like the sound of spooks, screams, and symphonies, keep listening as we unravel our mystic matter for this week.
In today's episode, we'll be dashing through the snow into the dark origins of the Winter Solstice and the history behind it.
Well, this is our first festive Bad Boo episode.
The start of the festive season.
So here we go.
How's everybody's December going? Have we all got our trees up? We don't, not just yet.
Not quite.
We're getting one tomorrow. Today, when the episode goes up.
The episode, when you're listening, if you're listening to it on the day it's come out, it's today.
So stay tuned to the Bad Boo Instagram if you want to see a picture of our Christmas tree.
But. Solstice.
Yes.
This is what we're all here for.
It is.
So, as we start off every single episode, go right back to the start. What is solstice?
So, the Winter Solstice is an astronomical event that marks the shortest day and the longest night of the year in either of the two given hemispheres that we have in the world. So, obviously the northern one or the southern one. It is considered the astronomical start of the winter season.
Obviously, there is a summer solstice as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's just both ends. But obviously, the season brings upon a winter solstice.
Yeah, one marks the days getting longer and the nights getting shorter, and the other one marks the days getting shorter and the nights getting longer. And this one is the latter of the two. So, just to round it up, the winter solstice is a precise moment in time that occurs only twice a year, like we said, for each hemisphere, where the Earth's axis is tilted at a maximum angle away from the sun. So basically this means that at noon on that day, the sun is directly overhead along the Tropic of Capricorn. So if anybody's into astrology or knows anything about that, it basically means that the same angle that Capricorn sits at is where the Earth is lining up to. And it means that observers in the northern hemisphere, the sun reaches the lowest point in the sky for the entire year, and means that the days get shorter from there.
Yeah.
Because it goes away, the sun goes away sooner.
Absolutely. I mean, you might be thinking, what's this got to do with something scary? But we'll be getting onto that very soon, because
don't you worry.
Along with what we've been saying, this winter solstice comes a lot of night times, and a lot of darkness. So.
And we all know what happens at night time.
Oh dear, the ghosts and ghouls come out, or your favourite haunted hosts come out. So
we are completely nocturnal, and we only come out in the night time.
Yes, we do. So that's why you'll be getting this episode and listening to it at night time, we hope. So the date of the winter solstice depends on the hemisphere that you are actually in. So if you're in the northern hemisphere, it occurs around sort of December the 21st or the 22nd, which marks the shortest period of daylight. And if you're in the southern hemisphere, it occurs during June 20th or the 21st. So it's sort of the winter or the summer solstice. It sort of depends. And it's very, very significant in terms of history.
It's pivotal for so many different religions and belief systems and all these different types of things.
Different types of folklore. So the winter solstice has been an absolutely major point of celebration and ritual across various cultures, like we were saying, where, because it marks a turning point after the longest night, it is celebrated as the rebirth, or the return of the sun, if you like.
Yeah.
As the daylight hours begin to gradually lengthen again. So it's like the sun sort of coming back. It's sort of having its sort of reboot card, if you like.
Yeah.
And ancient sites like the Stonehenge, the famous Stonehenge in England, and the Newgrange in Ireland are famously aligned to capture the first sunrise of the winter solstice, which demonstrates its sort of very long-standing importance to human civilization.
Ooh.
Which is again, those especially Stonehenge is particularly one of those really weird monuments where the stones don't belong there and are not from like geologically speaking, they're not from
nobody knows
around.
how they got there,
and they point exactly, like a line exactly to the first sunrise of that. So it's just really like cool.
Yeah, it is.
So, you know, stay tuned for another stone, a very familiar stone that we've actually spoken about before, which we'll be speaking about in a bit. But yeah, it's a little bit of an interesting fact about Stonehenge there.
So, we know what you're all thinking. Guys, this is meant to be a horror podcast, and like, as much as we do a little bit of history as well, we dabble in that. We're historians to an extent. We're not historians, we just research stuff.
We're really not.
But there's a reason that it is important, and we are getting to that right now.
Absolutely.
So, as we usually do, of course, now we know what the winter solstice is, we want to know why it's celebrated. Why do people care about the days getting longer or shorter?
It's not just about night, like longer bedtimes,
exactly,
or whatever it is.
That extra hour of sleep that you get.
There's a little bit of dark folklore coming up for you.
Of course there is. As much as the clocks get to go back or forwards, and we either get to gain an hour of sleep or lose an hour of sleep, I know what one I'd prefer.
Yes. And
but
if you're like the opposite, then what the heck?
Yeah, but there are other reasons why it's celebrated, and those are primarily rooted in two kind of core concepts, like we briefly touched on a second ago. One of them being the rebirth of light and the sun, and the other one being the survival during the deepest dark, like the dark parts of the day where it is longer and more drawn out.
Yes, absolutely.
So for the first part, the rebirth of the sun, this is kind of the most important reason for the celebration. That's just because it's acknowledging that the shortest day has passed, and that everybody will be moving forward from this time, and that the days will begin to lengthen again. So everybody gets more time together, everybody gets more hours in the day to do more things.
There's more light, isn't there?
Like a marking of like productivity and things like that.
Yeah.
It also symbolises hope and renewal, as it means that people who are dependent on cycles of the sun, because that's what our entire kind of calendars are built around. It especially means that for things like farming and for life, the solstice really guarantees that the sun isn't abandoning the earth, and it's marked as a triumphant return of light over darkness, and the promise that the spring and the summer are coming.
That's
and they're
nice.
putting an end to the winter.
Yes, well done, winter, for disappearing, and thank you for the summer appearing again. But yeah, I mean, again, it's very much to do with sort of, it's got a very sort of religious, or not necessarily religious, but it's got more kind of, it's very culturally significant, because it's kind of got that sort of astronomical perspective on how the universe works.
It's one of those things that people can't really argue about. Like, I feel like no matter what religion or culture you're a part of, you can't really argue as to whether the days are getting longer or shorter.
Because they just are.
Because they just do. It's part of the solar system.
That's the way it goes, my friend, I'm afraid.
But like we were just saying, it does mark a really big turning point, and that's because originally ancient cultures saw the shortest day of the year as the like point where the sun god, or basically the life force for the universe, was at its weakest and successfully managed to rebirth itself and return on this journey that it was carrying the earth on, pretty much. And this was basically just a huge ritual and a feasting that people would have to celebrate the rebirth of the sun god and the days getting slightly longer.
It's just, it probably is quite, especially like in history and in the past, it's probably quite a nice thing of sort of getting through the winter and getting through like the slog of the survival, and then bam, we're going down to the beach, we're getting an ice cream, we're all good, you know, type of thing.
And obviously, while all of that is very ironically bright and sunny, and all very lovely and la-di-da, the next bit is not so much, and that is what we will be focusing on, because that's what we're in at the moment. We're in the winter, aren't we? And the days are very short. It gets dark at about 2:30, 3 o'clock.
Yep.
And it's horrible.
It is. It's very kind of, you don't really see the daylight if you're working. It's just,
I wake up at 6:30 and it's dark. I leave work at 5:30 and it's dark.
It's just darkness.
It's just darkness all day long.
Perfect time to make a horror podcast, I'll tell you.
Yes, exactly.
That's the big bonus.
But that leads us into the second part of it, which is the like survival and feast side, because of these darker, like these plunges of darkness that we're getting longer turnouts of.
So the solstice typically falls around the time when the last of sort of the autumn harvest has been stored, or livestock has been slaughtered for sort of the winter sort of sustenance.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it kind of happens when everything's been done in preparation. It's sort of then, right, okay, now we sort of get ready for survival, if that makes sense.
I'm pretty sure it usually kind of falls around like the Halloween-ish time.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same as, not the same, but it has the same type of premise of harvesting as like Halloween originally did.
Yeah. I mean, we spoke about that in our Halloween episode, actually.
We did. So if you want to go and learn
5
about Michael Myers and the
Halloween and the Samhain, please go and check out our 5th episode of Bad Boo in our first season, which is the one right now. Let us know what you think, but listen to this one first. But yes, this essentially makes it a very natural time for celebration and sort of communal gathering. So people come together, they've sort of got everything ready, and it's kind of like, right, we're all in this together. So coming with like the feast, which is what we sort of briefly mentioned, it was sort of the last major feast before the deepest, sort of most resource scarce part of the winter began. So food, especially meat and fermented beverages, so like beers and wines and whatnot, were consumed to celebrate the sort of bounty of the harvest and prepare for the scarcity ahead of the people involved in like the villages and in the farms and whatnot. So it was quite it's probably kind of like a hooray, and then when it's done it's like oh shit.
So it's basically like, imagine that you're the tortoise from Over the Hedge.
Well, this is a very niche reference.
If you haven't seen Over the Hedge, get to know Over the Hedge. What are you doing with your life?
Yes, and anyone who says it's a bad film is just...
Don't trust their opinion on anything in life.
No, you shouldn't watch films anymore. I mean, come on. Get a grip.
Imagine you're the tortoise from Over the Hedge and you're just trying to gather food for your entire like family of woodland animals for your hibernation season.
Yeah.
And you've got
I think they do mention the winter solstice or something, or the winter. In like
they mentioned going into hibernation because winter's coming.
So Over the Hedge. That could have been our movie for this.
It could have been,
if it wasn't a horror podcast.
But it's not. I mean, that bear was pretty scary in that, actually.
To be fair, yeah, the bear.
Yeah.
But anyways, in ancient times, so during this like sort of feast point, the longest night was often feared, which is like what we were saying. So celebrations involved sort of lighting up huge bonfires, candles, and evergreen decorations, which sort of symbolise sort of persistent life even during a very cold and winterous sort of time, to ward off evil spirits. So yes, like Halloween with the pumpkins, and to create a sense of comfort and community sort of during a period of very maximal sort of darkness. Yeah. So it's quite that'd have been quite a difficult time. It's bittersweet, So
they had to celebrate it, because if they didn't, then everything would just be depressing and plunged into darkness, and fear would be so spread.
Yeah.
So they thought, you know what? Let's cheer it up a little bit.
Let's add a bit of cheer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Why not?
And with this, we also have a few like famous kind of historical celebrations that the winter solstice goes by as like in different cultures. So in pagan and Norse culture, we have Yule, or like the Yuletide celebrations, which are like heavily celebrated in Germanic and Norse cultures, which is basically where a 12-day festival occurs, which involves like really large feasts and bonfires and drinking and the burning of the Yule log, which has to be burned for 12 hours like straight, to symbolize the drawing back of the sun like from the earth, whereas the more modern traditions nowadays are still derived from the Yule, but obviously a lot of people don't burn a log for 12 hours. People like to have a Yule cake instead.
Yule cake. Yeah, there is like the Yule log things that you can have them like the cakes in like M&S or something. So Marks and Spencer's, if you don't know what that is.
Yeah.
If you're not from the UK.
Not to say that we shop at M&S, because we don't. We wish that we could.
We wish. I mean, it's
but
great food. But
if we're going to get cakes, we get them from M&S because they have the best ingredients.
They do.
If you want a good cake, get
an M&S cake. But yeah, say it's like a more of a Christmas thing in terms of modern times that sort of Yule tradition has sort of turned into. So you can kind of see the crossovers to the Christmas season and the Christmas sort of celebrations.
Mm-hmm. Well, they originally, before that one, or I suppose maybe kind of the same time period, but within a different part of the globe, they actually had the Saturnalia, which is the Roman celebration, which technically is really like a few days before the solstice, but it was a festival that closely was like tied to the season and kind of had the same idea going on with it, where it was a week-long celebration dedicated to the god Saturn, marked by, again, feasting and gift-giving and gambling this time.
Wow.
But
Casinos.
It was basically a temporary reversal of social roles.
So that's quite interesting. It's sort of similar again, but instead it's kind of like dedicated to a god instead of like the sun itself as sort of like a natural thing. It's sort of more going down the slightly more religious side. But obviously this time it's got gambling in it, which is very interesting.
And then going all the way over to a different part of the globe, we have, excuse my pronunciation, we have the Dongxi Festival in East Asia, which is celebrated in countries like China, Japan, and Korea, and like just other countries, predominantly in East Asia and the South. But it marks the day when the sun is at its weakest and begins to grow stronger and stronger, representing harmony and balance, or the yin and yang representation, which usually involves family gatherings and eating specific foods, which can sometimes be tangyong, which is like a glutinous rice ball, or like mochi in Japan.
Yeah. That's cool.
Excuse my pronunciation of those again.
But we're trying.
We're trying, and I have a very, very, very English accent, despite being half Indian.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's...
I can't help it, guys, but I'm trying. I'm trying.
But what you're all here for, of course, is the nitty-gritty dark folklore.
The dark bit, the scary bit, the spooky-dooky part of the mystic matter.
The bad boy part. So we've kind of gathered 3-ish kind of folklores, roughly, behind Winter Solstice that sort of make up what it kind of originally was. And these fears that we spoke of about all these people that are so scared of the darkness, what are they scared of? What are they trying to ward off? You know? So, of course, the first most common one is our spirits and malevolent forces. So during the longest night, darkness was said to have a very temporary power, which allowed dangerous entities to escape their sort of confines. So across sort of Germanic and Norse mythology, the solstice marked the beginning of the Yule, like we said. Which at the time was when the sky was dominated by sort of the wild hunt. This was a very terrifying procession of ghosts, demons, dead warriors, etc., led by figures like the god Odin, and the noise of the hunt, so like terrible rushing wind and barking dogs, signaled death or disaster for anyone caught outside.
That sounds absolutely petrifying.
Yeah, so that's right. That's pretty wild. And of course, witches and trolls. So if you haven't seen our witches episode, we'll go into a lot of detail about the witches. But yeah, that's our second episode. So go and check that one out after this one as well. You've got a lot of Bad Boo to watch if you've just tuned in. But when the sun had like a sort of lowest power point, not Microsoft, it was believed that witches and trolls were free to leave their rocky dwellings and caves, and they would gather power, cast spells, and pose a threat to livestock and sort of unprotected travellers who are out during the darkness and during the night time.
And you know what that means? The other creature that we mentioned was around during the same time that people were being accused of witches.
Werewolves.
So there might have been werewolves around as well. If you haven't seen that werewolves episode, go and watch that one as well.
That's the third one to tick onto your Bad Boo watch list after this one.
That's your Christmas homework. Go and watch those 3 episodes. The Halloween one, the witches one, and the werewolf one.
Mm-hmm.
It'll keep you busy for the whole of December.
Yes, you got a lot of
Christmas
horror
present.
spooks to listen to. And in regards to spirits and malevolent forces, the final one is the Winter Hag.
Ooh.
So the solstice was associated with the darkest aspect of the triple goddess mythology, often represented by, excuse my pronunciation, the Kaleech, or the Winter Hag / crone.
Just to specify, that is spelled Cailleach.
So if any of you know how that is actually pronounced, then please let us know.
I imagine it's probably a Gaelic word or
I suppose
like
so.
an Irish word.
Because it is part of Gaelic tradition.
Oh, I had no idea.
So she was the one who ruled the cold, icy season, embodying death, decay, and the raw, dangerous power of the winter. So there's a lot of opponents that people feared. I mean, these are just spirits themselves, but I mean, if this was going around saying these guys are all out and about, I'd be like, I'm not leaving.
Absolutely terrifying. I wouldn't leave the house. I'd be like, everybody get inside right now.
Livestock in, we're having that feast, we're drinking that wine, we're drinking that beer, we're staying inside.
Even if we don't have any food, we're still going to drink just so that we can't see them anymore, you know?
Exactly.
Rather it would be blurry and not be able to see these witches and hags and trolls and demons outside than go outside there sober, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, not fun at all.
No.
And if you want to hear a little bit more about hags, I know we keep on doing it and it's probably getting on your nerves now.
It's probably getting on your nerves, but there's a lot of bad
Go and watch our
stuff.
last episode.
Nightmares.
Because we did a whole one, not a whole one, but we did a little segment about a hag who is also a demon, potentially. Nobody knows, there's no proof, but go and find out.
Yes, go and find out, please. Nightmares, which is our last episode 9, the 4th one to tick onto your list. So if you just tuned into Bad Boo, you've got a lot of great stuff to catch up on. So just
100%.
saying. And make sure you subscribe so then you don't have stuff to backtrack on. So
exactly.
Or follow us if you're listening on Spotify.
And don't forget to get your nan to subscribe.
Your nan's probably tucking away for the winter.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't want those hags coming out and about.
She definitely doesn't, especially in the long dark nights that come with the winter solstice.
Mm-hmm.
Which leads us on to our second kind of dark reason as to why people would be afraid of this particular time of year, and that is because of the fear of the dead. And basically, in various European traditions, the solstice was a time to appease your ancestors, and it was necessary to leave out food or drink or light candles to satisfy the hunger that they had and to guide them back to their own realm, so that they don't linger or cause trouble in your own home. However, like we just mentioned a second ago, there was also another few creatures that could pose a threat at this time, and that's because of the combined power of the cold and the extreme darkness of the season. There was often associated to be a rise of monstrous figures along the nights, provided that there was a maximum cover of darkness because of the weather and the lack of daylight.
Yeah.
So it meant that for creatures like werewolves and for creatures like vampires, they could hunt without the fear of the dawn coming sooner.
Yeah.
And the fear of being hunted by humans because they were all locked inside because they were too scared because there was no light outside.
Yeah. I mean, that's just so many creatures that you think, bugger that, I'm not stepping a foot outside my front door because any of these things can bite your bloody tootsies off.
Bite more than just your tootsies off.
Yeah, a lot more for some. And finally, again, what we said earlier, there was that element of wanting to ward off the darkness. So many rituals were not acts of joyful celebration, but desperate acts of warding against dark forces. like we said, the Yule log, and utilising sort of loud noises and bonfires and all these types of things all mingled together. It was sort of everybody's way of trying to sort of banish these dark creatures and creatures that used to sit in the shadows and wait in the winter. It was a way to sort of create sort of a very protective perimeter around the homes, literally sort of driving the wild sort of wandering spirits away from warm human spaces. So again, very, very important, very, very vital, but also like this folklore is like what sort of makes Winter Solstice like a really poignant moment and belonging in the Bad Boo episodic sort of series, really, because it's got its place in folklore and darkness and scary, spooky stuff. So that's why we wanted to talk about it today.
Yeah, exactly. And with the Winter Solstice, obviously comes a time of reflecting. Because you're thinking about the season that's just passed, and you're thinking about all the things that are coming up, and the days changing, and the things that you've done, and how you can change with the longer time that you have in the day now. But reflecting is a very, very important act. And like we've been doing just a second ago, we reflected on a couple of our past episodes, and we're actually going to be doing that again in our next segment.
Oh, yes.
So here we go into the Isle of Fright.
So with the Isle of Fright, we have gathered an old friend of ours, i.e. the Devil's Longstone.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. The Devil's Longstone was actually an Isle of Fright segment in which, if you don't know, this is our segment where we talk about sort of some spooky stuff related to the topic that happens on our very home turf on the Isle of Wight.
Because this is where Sam is from, and it's where we both live now.
It's where we live now together.
Yes.
So we're revisiting the Devil's Longstone, which we talked about in our Demons episode. So essentially, just go and watch all the Bad Boo episodes. We're not going to say, go and watch this one, go and watch this one, go and watch this one. Watch all of them.
Yeah.
But this one is in our Demons episode, where we talk more about the demonic side of it, which we will touch on again. But this time, we're going to go down a little bit of a path of the sort of more ritualistic side and what it's got to do with the solstice, really.
Yeah. So remember last time when we were speaking about the Longstone, and we basically ended it by saying that it's still used nowadays for ritualistic practices to do with the sun and the moon and the seasons changing. The entire thing that it's used to celebrate nowadays essentially is the summer and winter solstices.
Yeah.
Is solstices a word?
It is now.
It is
Note
now.
it down.
So the Longstone, for those of you that don't remember from the last time that we mentioned it, is basically a remnant of a Neolithic chambered long barrow or tomb, which dates back to around 2000 to 3000 BC. So like many other like megalithic structures from that period at the time, things like Stonehenge, for example, its alignment suggests that it can function basically as an astronomical marker of sorts, because specifically for like the sun's most important annual events, the sun will strike the stone at a certain angle, like Stonehenge does for that sunset we were talking about a second ago. Like the Longstone does the same thing.
And the Longstone's like sort of geological material that shouldn't actually be there as well, which we actually mentioned as well, so we won't go into too much detail, but it's not actually designed to be there. And you can actually go and look at the Longstone. We got it on our Instagram at Bad Boo Productions, where we have a little reel that sort of outlines, you know, what the Longstone is, and shows you videos. Also on our TikTok as well. But again, it's sort of like one of those very strange things that just shouldn't be there, but it's very, very significant, especially in this regard.
100%. And basically, what we were saying a second ago, where they can either be related to the summer solstice or the winter solstice, it's actually been kind of not proven per se, but there is a little bit of evidence that does suggest that this Longstone is actually aligned more so to the winter solstice sunset.
Very, very interesting.
And that basically would mark the exact alignment of when the moment the sun disappears on the longest day of the year, potentially symbolizing the death of the solar year before its rebirth.
So again, it's kind of the same, like we say, about Stonehenge, and sort of what it represents is it could be perceived as something that is alluding to the moment of winter solstice or the summer solstice, for example.
Yep.
So like we said, whether it's marked sort of as the rising or the setting of the sun, the Longstone's purpose was to serve as sort of a very precise calendar marker for like Neolithic inhabitants. So this sort of identified the solstice as sort of like a very crucial thing for regulating agricultural life, rituals, and communal gatherings like around the stone and around the Isle of Wight as well, where its sort of very existence demonstrates that the sun's annual cycle and thus the solstice was paramount to ancient culture of the Isle of Wight. So again, it's got a very demonic past, ritualistic past, but it's also could be perceived as being something that is aligning to the winter solstice.
100%, and obviously that ties into the more ritualistic side of things. But where you just touched on the devil's aspect of it, which we did go more into in the previous episode where we mentioned it before, so the demons one, if you want to go and check that out. The Longstone's dark folklore is kind of intensified during the solstice, actually, because of the combination of the stone's like mystical nature and its like completely foreign like surroundings, because it's not really meant to be in that area at all.
No, not at all.
Along with the longest nights of the year causing spiritual vulnerability. And that's because since the devil is associated with darkness and chaos and obviously everything that's kind of big and bad with the world, the solstice and the height of darkness essentially would then be like surely his strongest and like most likely to visit hour, no?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, of course he's going to visit the stone, the very thing that is associated with the devil, on the longest night.
Yeah.
On the darkest moment of like winter.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes sense.
What is said to happen basically is that when you visit the Longstone on the winter solstice night, where the kind of sun goes away a lot quicker, then it's said that this is also the same night that the devil himself will actually go and visit the stone. And it would be an extreme act of like folly, just risking an encounter with the stone in this like infernal energy, because you don't know what you're going to see. Yeah. And you don't know who or what you're going to bump into.
I mean, we were talking about this today, actually. We said about that'd be cool to actually go and revisit the Longstone again, which is what Jodie actually recommended.
So if you want us to go and revisit the Longstone, then let us know. Leave a little comment below.
We can maybe go during the night. So that'll be quite a scary moment, but yeah, we'll happily do that. Of course, sort of as a Neolithic burial chamber, the site was inherently associated with the dead and the sort of underworld forces. So the solstice was sort of believed to thin the veil between the living and the dead, like anyway, as we all know. But the Longstone would become a site of which where like the spirits of the ancestors could be accessed, but also where like unwise or dangerous rituals could be performed. And there are some, rituals that are performed there now, either as ways to try and sort of conjure the devil, and there's also ones to try and cleanse these rituals. So it's kind of like trying to sort of balance it all out. So again, it's kind of all the things we've said about the Longstone, but looking at it through a lens of the solstice, it does make sense.
It does.
That there would be more dark energy, and this is perhaps why these sort of white witches, for example, would go and do these rituals to try and cleanse it, because especially during the winter, far more likely to get sort of malevolent forces coming around the stone, conjuring the devil, anything sort of hellish like that.
100%. And that's what makes it all the more terrifying, is even if you don't go up there knowing that it's the devil's Longstone, just because of the relations that it has around it and the things that people might have gone and like manifested in that area through ritual or just through practice or belief or whatever it may be, you don't know if there's anything up there or not. And the air up there does just feel weird to breathe in. Yeah. It is a very kind of, it's a place that stays with you when you leave. And one of the reasons that it is so kind of off-putting is actually to do kind of with a popular piece of folklore, which is the belief that the Longstone comes alive and can walk on specific nights. So sometimes to drink from the nearby spring, or sometimes just to rearrange itself. It's said that the Longstone can actually just get up and have a little wander away.
And can you imagine that? Because it's quite like a solid looking stone, but
Yeah.
again, if it's got these powers, and especially during the winter solstice, it's sort of unsurprising to think that it would just have more power and more energy. If
And
you're talking about like from like an evil point of view.
You know what's just kind of clicked in my head, which has actually just given me like full body chills?
What's this?
When we went and visited the Longstone, do you remember how there were loads of different trails, right, like going off of it in different directions?
Yes.
Isn't it funny how all of those trails were about the width of the stone if it was to roll itself somewhere?
Yeah, I mean that makes sense having all these different trails, because we were up there and we said, where do all these like paths go?
And they're all roughly about the same
We didn't
size,
go and have a look, but
which is like the thickness of what the actual stone
it
is itself.
could be where the stone wanders around.
Rolls itself to.
Doesn't surprise me.
Oh, that just gives me like chills. But yeah, essentially, because it's the longest and darkest night of the year on the winter solstice, and of course it's then the most likely time for like the magic like to occur, it means that if local people were to stumble across the stone while it was like quote unquote walking, then it would signify a terrifying break in the natural order of the world and an immediate threat to the observer's sanity or life, because it could also mean that the devil might be nearby.
Yeah, I mean,
and that is why the Longstone
the worst.
and the solstice is so bloody terrifying.
Yeah, when they work hand in hand, you can kind of see, even through culture, that there is crossovers, you know, and it's very, very spooky. And I think that, you know, it's very much got its like reasonings for being associated with the winter solstice for sure. So obviously these are like, it's involved and you have to go through quite like some woodland to get there. And you know, the woods are certainly something to steer clear from.
I wouldn't want to be going there in the dark.
No, but if you guys want us to go, then obviously we will. But talking of some woods to steer clear from, especially during the winter, that leads us nicely onto our boo or bust.
For this boo or bust, today we're actually going to take it kind of a tiny little bit off-road a little bit. Only because the winter solstice is actually quite a difficult topic to find relative stories on. So where we touched on a second ago saying that all different types of creatures come out around the winter solstice, when the days are longer, when the nights are colder, when there's less light around in the world and everybody's locked away in their beds or cozied up, there are things that come out that nobody ever wants to see or talk about.
Absolutely
and
not.
We're here to talk about it.
We're here to talk about it and read it about it.
Exactly. And that leads us on to a little Reddit story for today called Stay Out of the Woods During Winter.
By a Reddit user called xKacho or Cacho. We'll leave the link in the description anyway. But it is from the No Sleep subreddit. And as always, just kick your feet back and have a listen and decide whether it's a boo, so real, or bust, false.
So just to give a quick trigger warning for the story, as it is a very disturbing story with a very tragic incident in it involving a loved one and a tree. So if that is something that you think may trigger you or may upset you, or if you have a sensitivity towards subjects that could be related to that in any type of way, then please don't listen to this story. Just skip to the next section.
Skip along.
Because it is quite scary and it's quite sinister.
And quite graphic at points.
Yes,
so
and quite graphic at points. Just
skip along and we'll see you in the next section. If not,
enjoy.
Here we go.
Since I was young, my grandfather always told me not to go into the woods during winter. He meant the Hatterkin Woods, located near the border of our reserve, and not just any old forest. This always struck me as a scare tactic to keep the children from getting lost or climbing the trees, which were so tall you might think they were brushing against the clouds. That was until this morning. The day was going as per usual. I woke up and walked over to my grandparents' house to greet her for our morning cup of coffee, but something felt off this morning. I'm not sure if it was just me, still being tired from a shortened sleep due to the storm that had practically terrorised our grounds, but nonetheless, something was wrong. When I walked up those old steps on the front porch, it reminded me of the days I would go there as a young kid and jump up as many steps as possible before I was scared of something living under the porch grabbing my ankle as I was walking up. Of course, this was just nonsense fear, and I haven't done that for years.
I knocked on the door in a way that wouldn't startle them in their older age, and after about 15 seconds, my grandmother opened the door. This is where I noticed something wasn't the same. As she pulled the door open and looked up at me with an almost confused look. She opened her mouth as if she was about to speak and asked what I was doing here, but her mouth closed and remained silent. "Good morning, Grandma. How was your sleep?" I asked her to break the silence so we could move on with our morning routine. She looked at me once again. This time, her eyes appeared diluted and scared. "Your grandfather hasn't come home since yesterday evening," she said in a timbre voice. With this news, I didn't immediately know what to say. My grandfather was practically a seasoned veteran around these grounds and rarely got lost. I took the initiative to ask the question that I feared I already knew the answer to. "Where did he go last?" I said shyly. When asked this question, she stared in my eyes once again and said, "He went into the forest." My stomach dropped. My brain suddenly filled with all the memories of him telling me how dangerous it was during the winter. I told her not to worry, and that he probably has just got invested into a hunt and lost track of time. She still seemed off, and was barely speaking to me, as if she was coming in and out of a daydream. Finally, I told her I was going to go and look for him. After all, what did I have to fear? It was the middle of the day, and I've never been one to believe in these kind of myths and stories that grandparents tell the youth to scare them. I should have believed them.
I began to walk away, climbing down those porch stairs again, when I heard my grandmother finally speak up once again. "He always liked those trees," she mumbled from behind me. I turned my head to see her staring up at the sky, smiling, and she slowly lowered her eyes down and met my own, still smiling. I would be lying if I said that this didn't at least creep me out. I mean, your husband is missing and you're smiling and remember how he enjoyed the trees. I don't understand. Regardless, I will do my duty and see if I can find him. I walked for about 30 minutes, give or take, until I finally reached the border of the infamous woods which I had been so repeatedly warned about. Seemed normal to me, just a beautiful winter day where the bare trees held a couple inches of snow on each branch, a small amount of wind in the air, just enough to blow the snow around from time to time, not enough to whistle. I began walking. Luckily the snow was only a few inches deep and my boots were high enough to cover until just below the knees. I walked and I walked, calling out, "Grandpa! Grandpa!" over and over again, in hopes that he would hear me. He didn't respond. That was until I could have sworn I heard someone whistling near this large oak tree about 100 feet in front of me. I began walking towards the whistle, but I started getting a strange feeling and the hairs on my body began to stand up as I got closer. The whistle was not caused by the wind, but it didn't sound like it was created by a person either. It was a single note, dragged out for about 10 seconds at a time, never changing. I neared the tree but didn't see anyone. I did the only thing left that I could do. I began to raise my head and look up. There he was, tangled in the branches, with what looked like every limb on his body being broken as if he had fallen from the top and got stuck on the way to the ground. I began to cry and scream for help, but then I heard that whistle again. Same note, same length. I looked up again, and this time his eyes were wide open, and his pupils were dilated, just like my grandmother's. This morning when I met her for coffee. I am not proud of what happened next, but honestly I don't know what anyone else would have done. I ran as fast as I could back to the reserve.
I was running, crying, screaming, and just hoping to see another pair of eyes that looked normal, so I could get that image out of my head. I wanted to see my grandmother, but I was scared of her, and I was not sure if I could handle it. But of course, I had to tell someone that my grandfather is in that tree, and potentially alive. I went back to my place first, to calm myself down, as I was not even entirely sure what just happened was real. I took about 5 minutes to calm down, have some water, and get prepared to handle this situation I am now directly in the middle of. Finally, I opened my front door ready to deal with whatever I just experienced. I began to run over to my grandparents' house again, almost tripping because my boots were not great for running, but I didn't care. I just had to get to the house. I got to the stairs on the porch and began to climb them just like I do every morning, and just as I was about to knock on the front door, I heard something I couldn't believe. The whistle. The same one I heard in the woods not long ago. My body froze. Every hair on my body stood up once again, and I was struck with the most fear I'd ever felt in my life, as I saw my grandmother and grandfather staring at me through the front window, both smiling with huge black eyes, and then whistling the same note in unison.
I turned and ran as fast as I could, still hearing that same note being whistled in the distance, not stopping until I reached my house. I slammed the door behind me and locked it immediately. There was immediate silence. The kind of silence that makes you feel uneasy and anxious. A silence that is so loud, it was deafening. I shut the blinds and sat in my house alone, left to think about what I had just experienced. The only thing I could do was write about it so I could reflect and see if I'm going crazy or not. Maybe I am. Who knows? Maybe I imagined the entire thing. Because honestly, that would be better than it all being real. Update. It's been many hours now since it happened, and it's getting dark outside, which made me feel scared. But I'm going to try and sleep so I can figure out what I'm going to do tomorrow. I hope I go to my grandparents' house and everything is normal. I just want my normal life back.
Nothing strange has happened since I've been home. It's just been silent. At one point, I could have sworn I heard something moving under my bed. But that just makes me sound like a paranoid kid, and I'm sure it was just my imagination. Update 2. I heard the moving again. This time, it was more aggressive and audible. I screamed when I heard it, but I'm too scared to check. It's been about 30 minutes since it happened, and I don't know what else to do other than write. I'm scared to run. I'm scared to check. I'm scared to even make any noise, but I need someone to know what happened to me if I go missing.
Update 3. Someone just whistled. Same note, same length. And it's coming from under my bed.
Oh boy, there we go. That is the story, Stay Out of the Woods during winter. And you know, we always say about your nan that she would enjoy the podcast, but this nan seems to be a little bit crazy.
She got a bit too into the podcast.
She got a bit too into the
tried things
podcast.
For herself.
She's made a story for us to read.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that was pretty freaky. With all the whistling and like the mangled body in a tree and
I know
all that kind of stuff. Especially your grandparents. I mean, that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, let us know in the comments whether you think it's a boo or a bust. But
I definitely think it was a boo.
It gives energy of a boo because it's very unique. And also like it very much links to the old sort of folklores and talking about things in the winter and like the woods and all this kind of stuff, steering clear of things like that during the winter months, because these are when these spirits, like we read in our Mystic Matter section, come out, and this is when they are most malevolent, most violent, most prevalent, pretty nasty. So I think it's also a boo. So if you're on Spotify, you can comment, let us know. YouTube, comment, let us know whether you think it's a boo or a bust. And yes, talking as well of very peculiar, cold, wintry places and snowy places to steer clear from, especially from peculiar family members, that leads us on to our Silver Scream.
Getting into the Silver Scream now. As we usually do, we're going to give you guys a movie quote. If you haven't guessed the film already, just from the thumbnail of this video or from the videos that we've been posting on Instagram, or even the title, like Sam said, then where have you been? Are you sleeping under a little rock?
Probably. Most probably. And as we start off every silver screen, we start off with a little movie quote. Sometimes can be long, sometimes can be short. And this one is particularly short, one word, but we hope that you get it. Again, go to the comments, let us know if you got it. And here's the quote for you.
Are we ready for this? I'm going to do an impression. 3, 2, 1. Red rum. Red rum.
That's very good.
Red rum.
That's on point, I think. You could have been in Stanley Kubrick's horror masterpiece
From 1980.
The Shining.
The Shining.
Amazing. So, yes, it is obviously a novel by Stephen King, the amazing horror king himself. But it was adapted into the very, very iconic, masterfully done horror movie under the same name, The Shining. So, as we give in every silver screen, if you are living under a rock and you are listening to this horror podcast and you have not seen The Shining, please go and watch it.
Yes, go and watch The Shining.
It's just one of those like mind effing movies that like is so like deeply psychotic and scary and unsettling in every way. But we're going to give you a little plot summary, leave out the spoilers for the ending because it's got a particular ending that's very, very disturbing. But we're going to leave that out just so it's spoiler free. So then you can go and watch it for yourselves and get the experience. But
it is so good. It's definitely worth the watch. For anybody that's got the extra time.
Absolutely.
Go and watch the damn movie. Okay?
Please.
Okay. Anyway, so a little plot summary for you. So, the film The Shining is about a Mr. Jack Torrance, who is a writer and recovering alcoholic who takes a job as a solitary winter caretaker of the remote Overlook Hotel with his wife Wendy and his psychic son Danny. The hotel is intensely haunted and begins to corrupt Jack, exploiting his isolation and anger. Danny's powerful psychic gift, aka The Shining, shows him these terrifying visions of the hotel's violent past. As the hotel isolates the family with heavy snowfall from the mountainous weather outside, Jack's sanity collapses as well. He becomes convinced that he must, quote-unquote, correct his family, fully embracing the hotel's evil influence. I won't say what he does there, because the rest of it kind of spoils the film. But that's just a little preface plot summary for you.
It's kind of like a slow burn, gets more and more like evil type thing. And obviously the great Jack Nicholson plays our good old Jack Torrance. But yeah, it's very, very disturbing. It's a very creepy film. But we'll go into a little bit of the influence and the legacy behind the amazing The Shining. So, like other horror films, and often horror films like to utilize locations or buildings as a character almost in itself, the Overlook Hotel is actually considered the monster itself. So the film fundamentally changed the haunted house genre, really, by establishing the location, like I say, the Overlook Hotel, as the primary antagonist. It is the very reason everything happens, the reason Danny sees these visions, it's the reason that Jack becomes so evil and it exploits his kind of who he really is.
Yeah.
And the hotel is not merely haunted by ghosts, it is like a sentient, malevolent entity in itself.
Yeah.
That actively poisons and consumes people in it, in whatever way that is. So it is, the opening shot of the film is very much a very long establishing shot where you follow them going to the hotel, and then it's this like grand shot of the hotel, but the music is, I've got kind of goosebumps thinking about it. The music is really sinister. then you just know from the get-go that they're going
like
somewhere
some messed
bad.
up stuff is about to happen.
They're going somewhere very bad. Where the architecture of the building itself, so like the hallways that shouldn't connect, and windows in like implausible places, is often sort of seen, I suppose, as a representation of psychological instability, influencing the sort of literature and even horror games that use geometry to induce anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about you, Geometry Dash. We're talking about you. That is an anxiety-inducing game that I just want to smash up every single thing that has it on, because
it's so fun though.
But if you think about it, all the hallways, all of the architecture, all of the shots, all of the framing of The Shining, all uses like geometric shapes that really like screw up your eyes in the sense that it gives you anxiety, because there's so much detail that it's kind of like, I don't know where to look, and it's all confusing.
And it's also just set in that like 70s kind of style, which also is when like serial killers and stuff were like popping off anyway.
Yes.
In America.
Yes.
And
indeed.
I don't mean popping off in like a Slay type of way. I mean popping off in like a increasing drastically amongst the population for unknown reasons.
There was an increase for sure.
There was a huge increase like in serial killers and murders across the 1960s to the 1980s.
Very poignant in many ways.
This film, I feel like, just truly, really encapsulated that time, especially because it was in a remote area. But it really took that like kind of whole serial killer motive and switched it on the like, it could be someone you know type of thing.
Yes.
Like
a familial type of thing.
Just grappling with their own sanity.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what's kind of the scariest thing about it, is it's not like it's a random person that comes in and taunts the family. It's that
the father.
The father goes insane.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Because the place makes you insane.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like that's what the most kind of like terrifying bit is.
No, it is. I mean,
and it also kind of gives you a reason to like understand what we were talking about earlier about the solstice of don't celebrate by yourself.
Yes.
If you're by yourself, if you isolate from these celebrations, then spooky things are going to happen to you. You're going to end up in a haunted hotel in the middle of nowhere at the top of a hill, and then you're going to get possessed by the hotel, and then you're going to try and kill your family.
Yeah, that is the plot of The Shining. And if you, celebrate the winter solstice alone. So don't do that.
So, like we were just saying a second ago about the American cultural significance that the film has, particularly with the times between the 60s and the 80s. It's also said that critics and cultural analysts frequently interpret the film as a commentary on the dark and unresolved history of like the United States, kind of as a whole, and particularly at the time that the film was being shot, so the late 1970s, where it was released in the year of 1980, because the hotel is actually built on Native American burial grounds. And obviously from the previous owners that have like premonitions in the film, the actual building itself is just steeped in hidden violence of the elite. And this symbolizes the trauma and genocide buried beneath the veneer of American success, which
is kind of,
I think, speaks very, very closely to quite a lot of the kind of like foundations of a lot of American places and a lot of American issues, especially like politically.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're not going to get too much into it right now because this isn't a politics podcast, unfortunately. But I think it's very well known across the globe that America has a lot of stigma, understandably so, and a lot of wrongdoings within its past surrounding the stealing and colonization of lands from particular groups of people, and that is very much perpetuated in this film.
It is indeed.
But that's not the only kind of issue that this film does tackle, because the story also serves as like a really chilling, almost deconstruction in a way of like the idolized family aspect of everything, especially exploring things like how like alcoholism and isolation and just like generational abuse really turn the domestic space into a psychological prison at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So when you think of all these things that the film really like denotes, it's actually a really, really hard-hitting film that speaks about a lot of important subjects.
It does, and a lot of sort of tricky subjects to talk about, but it kind of mashes them into one.
It does. It's like an amalgamation of all of like these different types of trauma in one place, kind of consolidating as like a person's worst nightmare.
Absolutely.
So it is just really like messing around with the psyche of the character and of the audience.
But moving on to some conspiracy theories, both from sort of fan culture and just general conspiracies about The Shining. The film's ambiguity, so like the lack of sort of a definitive answer as to whether the horror is supernatural or psychological, has made it a fertile ground for intense fan interpretation and deep analysis. Really, you know, what is a Stanley Kubrick film really without a deep analysis? So the complexity and meticulous detail inherent within sort of Stanley Kubrick's work has led fans to believe that the film contains hidden codes or messages, and it very much does. The most famous and widely debated theory explored in the documentary Room 237 suggests that the film is a veiled confession that Kubrick helped the US government fake the 1969 moon landing, which that's a very famous film theory, is that Kubrick was the one that faked it, if that's what you believe. The theory is often cited due to Danny's Apollo 11 sweater in the film, and the geometric shapes within the hotel that supposedly relate to NASA imagery.
Ooh, I never knew that.
So people think that it was Stanley Kubrick. If it was a faked thing, which is one of the greatest, biggest debates in history, they think it was, if it was to be faked, it was Stanley Kubrick that did it, and that NASA would have employed him to do so.
Well, it's a good choice of director to do it.
Yeah, so they've done a good job. But again, like I say, these hidden messages, there's also many of them, which we'll come on to in a minute.
Just quickly with the moon landing, the flag was waving and there's no air in space. Just saying.
That is the big thing.
Just saying. And there was no stars in the sky.
Nope. That's what I mean, there's flaws.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's fake,
flaws.
but I'm saying that there's some stuff going on.
Questions.
Beyond the moon landing, fans sort of often obsessively decoded objects and scenes. So, for example, the recurring cans of baking powder are interpreted as a coded reference to Native American genocide, as the brand of baking powder, sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, Calumet, Calumet, is a Native American term for a peace pipe. And this demonstrates the film's legacy as a cultural puzzle box that compels obsessive frame-by-frame scrutiny decades after its release. So it sort of scrutinises what America has essentially done.
Honestly, fair play, because somebody needed to say it, and I didn't actually know any of this about the film, but it's given me so much more. Not that it wasn't already an amazing film anyway, but I think when films like this do really speak into like political issues or things that are kind of like dismissed a lot by public figures, then like props to you, Stanley Kubrick, for like purposely working these into this film.
Because this type, when you sort of integrate political messaging into films subconsciously like this, without you sort of explicitly being like pushed into your face, that's when it's more effective.
100%.
When it's kind of something that you feel rather than being told, if that makes sense.
And it really gets you to think about it properly.
It does.
And not only like for the state of America and its kind of like wrong foundings, but also just the representation of like very misrepresented kind of minor groups, you know, like Native American people and the issues that they currently have, even in this like economic state nowadays, because I know that they're not very supported by the American government, as well as a lot of other people who like were on the land before a lot of other types of people were.
Before it was the colonization.
Colonization, and it's just like something that people don't like to talk about because it's a sensitive subject, and it's important that it's brought to mainstream media through films like The Shining. So
it's a timeless movie.
Hats off to Stanley Kubrick, if that's what he intended. If it's not, then hats off to the people that came up with these theories and make it an important film about that regardless.
But hats off to Stanley Kubrick for even sort of giving off that impression, if that's the case.
Yeah, exactly. But just divulging a little bit back into the actual film itself and getting into the more design and like pop culture elements of it. The Shining actually introduced imagery and aesthetic motifs that became immediately recognizable shortcuts for conveying psychological dread in modern horror media and design as we know it today. So like what you were saying a minute ago, Sam, about the interior of the hotel and all the geometric shapes and everything, those distinctive and like aggressively geometric patterns, like you were just talking about, at the Overlook Hotel, and its iconic orange and red carpet, it's perhaps like one of the most ubiquitous pieces of iconography arguably ever in a horror film.
Yeah.
I felt like if you were to put that carpet in any other type of horror film, then people would like recognize it straight away.
I think it's been like replicated in other films as well in terms of like nods to The Shining.
100%. And on that same stem, it is actually frequently replicated or referenced or even parodied in video games and clothing and interior design, just to really invoke a sense of disorientation and impending doom. Not quite sure why you'd want to put that in your home, but it's up to you. Similarly, the really like endless symmetrical hotel corridors are also just visual shorthand for the isolation and entrapment of the characters.
You think about when like Danny's sort of going around on his little trike.
Yeah.
He's constantly going around hallways, and you think, when is this stopping? Mm-hmm. They're symmetrical with all these like funky patterns everywhere.
Especially when they get...
It's kind of, it shows how isolated it is. It's like a maze. And obviously there's the iconic maze outside.
That's literally what I was about to say. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, but it's the same in and out.
Yeah,
isn't it?
not only is it the maze outside, the hotel itself is a maze, but I also think it represents that
trapped.
their minds are mazes as well, because they're trying to navigate these issues.
There's so many beautiful shots of like the maze from the bird's eye sort of viewpoint of view. It's amazing. So going off from that, obviously a very, very iconic part of The Shining, of course, is the uncanny twins.
Come play with us, Danny.
Yes, those two.
Forever and ever and ever and ever.
I think she's going to be going on forever and ever, so I'll just carry on.
And ever and ever. I'll stop now.
Yes, because that would go on forever and ever, and I don't think our viewers would be listening forever and ever. So, the image of the twin girls standing silently in the hallway is a direct visual quote used across TV, film, and art to sort of signify the uncanny. Mm-hmm. So it's like that's essentially the familiar made terrifying. They represent the sort of a break in the natural reality and often deployed to induce immediate dread across the film. So that sense of the uncanny and something not being quite right, and there's so many strange pieces of imagery in the film, especially that of the guy dressed as a dog. I hate that part so much. Yeah, if you want to know what it is, just type in The Shining dog and you'll know what I mean. But watch it first, because that part is so freaky.
And
the bathtub scene as well.
Only over 18 should be searching that, by the way.
Yes, please. Yeah, just go and see that. Only if you are of the age of being able to watch The Shining, of course. And of course, like we said about the design, the film's sense of sort of spatial entrapment and madness has completely heavily influenced the design of modern immersive entertainment. Mm-hmm. So notably haunted houses. Yep. So we recently a couple of months ago, we went to Thorpe Park.
We did.
To do Fright nights, which is amazing. So if you're in the UK and you do Fright, want to do something spooky, go to Thorpe Park or Alton Towers. You can do, I think it's called Scarefest at Alton Towers, I might be wrong. And Fright nights at Thorpe Park. They're haunted houses we walk through and go through some pretty crazy experiences there. And that is often obviously seen as being a direct sort of immersive sort of influence from The Shining.
Mm-hmm.
So this also comes with obviously escape rooms as well, and horror video games.
Yep.
So trying to think of any off the bat, but
I think just the back rooms is like the most notable one, isn't it?
like kind of what in general,
Like
sort of
liminal spaces. And
liminal
stuff like
spaces
that,
are
yeah.
probably influenced by that as well.
Mhm.
But in terms of games, I'd probably say any type of sort of first-person horror sort of experience game would probably be influenced by The Shining. So I'd probably say like any of the Outlast games or Resident Evil, particularly Resident Evil 7. That has gives me Shining vibes. But anyway, the goal of these sort of designs that are utilised is often to replicate the feeling of being pursued through an unsettling, seemingly impossible space, which is a concept like completely perfected by the Overlook Hotel and its hedge maze, which you spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is like a maze, and it's supposed to invoke the sense of confusion and dread and fear and entrapment
Yeah.
within a mad sort of place.
Just bringing it back to the twins again, I think, for me at least, I feel like that's where the whole kind of trope of like the scary little girl horror trope came from, was this film, you know? Because like obviously we have films like Annabelle and things like that where they're associated with dolls or like young girls, or even The Ring, like Samara, those types of things. But those all came afterwards, right? In like the 90s, early 2000s, and even 2000 and like 12, 13, when like the Conjuring films started to come out.
Sort of the thing.
But before that, there was the twins from The Shining.
Yeah.
And their classic, like, come play with us, Danny. Like, classic, like, little girl voices and, like, that whole aspect of innocence just being absolutely flipped on its head.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's where the idea of, like, having terrifying, like, little girls and, like, making them really scary, like,
definitely
conduits for things.
If The Shining was like the whole sole reason for it, you know?
Yeah. But yeah.
Going back to the old maze, I suppose.
We're really making this a maze of an episode by going like to and from things, aren't we?
We're making this confusing for you, but try and keep it up. The iconic hedge maze was actually not filmed in a real outdoor maze, funny enough. It was a massive exterior set built near the Elstree Studios lot in England, and it took the crew several weeks to grow and install all the hedges, which are actually made of small conifer trees. So it wasn't actually an on-site thing or a natural maze. It was constructed solely for the purpose of the film. And the long shot showing the maze from above, which is what I was saying earlier, like the really, really beautiful ones, with Jack's small figure wandering through it, were actually achieved using a miniature model of the maze and not a full-size set. So obviously this is quite standard for films, especially during the 70s and 80s, and perhaps even before. Sort of very, very notably is Star Wars, that use like miniature models and to try and make something look big. So you have like the AT-AT walkers, or you have the Star Destroyers or anything like that in Star Wars, made to look massive, and you wouldn't think, oh, they're tiny. You know, it's not movie magic, and it's all about perspective. Same thing applies in The Shining, which is obviously a film that came around at sort of the same point Star Wars was coming into play. Same year as The Empire Strikes Back, actually. Yeah, I mean, movie magic, but you wouldn't actually know. I mean, I didn't know that it was a miniature.
I didn't know either.
The maze itself is...
That's really, really surprising, because the entire thing is so well done that it looks like it's shot outdoors and that it's one smooth, like, set, pretty much.
Yeah.
So, where we were just talking about Jack's small figure running through the infamous maze that we were just talking of a second ago, Jack Nicholson is obviously the infamous actor for Mr. Jack Torrance of The Shining, like we were just mentioning at the start of this segment. But he actually had his own creative input towards certain aspects of the film. The most infamous one being the famous line, "Here's Johnny," when he like shouts through the door after breaking through it with an axe. Actually wasn't in the script at all, and Nicholson improvised the line referencing Ed McMahon's opening introduction for Johnny Carson from The Tonight Show, and Stanley Kubrick basically just loved it and kept it in for the final cut.
It's become the most iconic
it has
one of the like most iconic pop culture
from the
lines in
entire
history.
film, yeah.
But like in just terms of like horror history and history of movies, like "Here's Johnny" is like just such a classic line. And again, it always seems to be like these unintentional points where it sort of like wasn't intended.
Yeah.
They all seem to become like the most like iconic parts of any film, which is really amazing.
And on the topic of amazing things, Mr. Jack Nicholson was actually a former volunteer firefighter before he went into acting. And so for the scene where he has to chop down the door, obviously they wanted to do it as efficiently as possible with them being filmmakers. And with films, time is money and money is time. So you want to get these things done as soon as you possibly can. And to make the scenes last longer and for it to appear more desperate, the prop department actually had to replace the initial breakaway doors that they had made. Just because they're meant to kind of break down a lot easier than actual doors. They replaced them with real solid wood doors, as with his previous firefighter knowledge, he knew how to break through them properly and most efficiently.
That probably makes it more scary because, like, especially for for Wendy, like his wife, having seen this axe actually coming through a door, not a prop door. Like,
exactly.
Full on force. It's like.
It's his own actual like strength that's doing that. And he's not just putting more effort into breaking down like a flimsy fake door.
Jack Nicholson being a firefighter, can you?
I know, that would be really scary.
Like seeing that through like through the mask.
Fire and like he came up with a big smile on his face and tried to save you.
Yeah.
I would burn. I'd be like, nah, I'm alright, thank you.
No, I'll stay here.
Yeah.
I'll stay cooking. So that's cool. And on the subject of Jack Nicholson, he actually, you know, if you're listening, you might know this. There's points throughout the film, I think it was his decision, where he actually subtly looks at the camera when he's like moving his head between like looking at different things. Every time pretty much he will subtly look at us as the audience, but it's a subliminal thing that you don't realise, which is really what drives that sort of
it's in your head type of thing.
Yeah, but it drives that anxiety. You think, I don't know why I'm so anxious about him, but your brain has picked up the fact that he's been looking at you the whole time, but you don't actually really see it unless you're looking for it. It's so clever.
Oh, it's just so uncomfortable to think about though. It's making me like squirmy. So in spite of how amazing this film is, apparently it's said that the set wasn't actually as amazing as the film turned out to be in the end. One of these main reasons is that for the actress who plays Wendy, so the very, very famous Shelley Duvall, who plays Jack's wife, Wendy Torrance, in the film, she actually endured immense stress during the filming, and that was due to Stanley Kubrick's notorious intense methods, where Kubrick actually isolated Duvall and criticised her in front of the crew, and even forced her to perform the terrifying staircase baseball bat scene 127 times, which remains a record for the most takes of a single dialogue scene in cinema history. And this technique was intentionally used to achieve a genuine frazzled and distressed performance out of the actress herself.
As that explains why she's like really swinging it and like kind of really like losing it, if that makes sense. It's kind of very extreme. Yeah. But, you know, in a kind of a weird, twisted, sick way, it kind of gives that real performance that she's like distressed and like over it, if that makes sense. Well,
and it wasn't just for that scene either. It was also for the infamous "Here's Johnny" scene, where Jack smashes through the bathroom door, because it took 3 days and reportedly 60 doors to smash through and actually film. So she would have had to be in the bathroom hyping herself up and like be trembling in fear for 60 different
doors and 3 days worth. That's crazy. Yeah. And of course, probably the most iconic part of The Shining in terms of trivia, I suppose, is actually the fact that Stephen King didn't like the adaptation at all.
And for those of you that don't know, you're probably thinking, why would Stephen King care?
Why would he care? I mean,
it's because he wrote the book first. It's his idea.
He wrote it. As we mentioned previously, Stephen King famously hated Kubrick's film adaptation and felt that it was fundamentally misunderstood his novel. And King was so disappointed that Kubrick cast Nicholson and argued that the character of Jack should start as a kind, normal man who slowly descends into madness, not someone who appears manic from the beginning. So, again, I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine anybody else playing Jack Torrance other than Jack Nicholson, because he does appear like a nice in some ways, but there's that undertone of like odd about him, and I think that's what's really, really important, in my opinion. But in King's original novel, the scariest room was actually room 217, not room 237, which was the one in the film. And this change was actually made because of the Timberline Lodge in Oregon, which is used for the exterior shots, requested that number be changed since they actually had a room 217 and feared the guests would refuse to stay in it. That is some interesting stuff about that and about the rooms, because who would want to stay in a room that's associated with The Shining? I don't know.
And of course, while we're on the note of unnerving things that could possibly get people to steer away from things, let's head on to our Shivering Soundtracks part of the episode. Now, for the Shivering Soundtracks part of today's episode, obviously we're going to be delving into the soundtrack for the 1980 film The Shining. However, for the most part, the film actually doesn't have an original score, and that was done on purpose by Stanley Kubrick, as he actually chose to use a overwhelming majority of pre-existent orchestral music, often called like found music, rather than commissioning a traditional source. This is because it was the fourth film that he had kind of done in a row to use this technique, following 2001 A Space Odyssey and A Clockwork Orange. And this meant that the bulk of the terrifying tonal music used to signal the hotel's presence actually came from a 20th century avant-garde composer called Krzysztof Penderecki and Georgi Ligeti, as these pieces were known for their dissonant and modern but chilling tones.
But of course, as we mentioned, there was some original music put in there. Wendy Carlos's contribution, so the composition to the film, especially the film's iconic opening theme, which is very ominous, and you synthesize calls that accompany the drive to the Overlook Hotel, is a rendition of the medieval hymn Dies Irae, or the Day of Wrath. And this arrangement was created by Wendy Carlos, who also scored A Clockwork Orange, giving the score its chilling, futuristic and synthetic atmosphere. So you might not know, it goes pum, 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 which actually, if you play Dead by Daylight, that uses the exact same theme but in a different rhythm.
Ooh,
funny enough.
I didn't know that.
Kubrick often layered multiple pieces of music, particularly Penderecki's work, over the top of one another during the film's climax, and this was done to create an intense feeling of disorientation and panic, where the sound itself becomes almost an assault on the audience.
And again,
Which
like
makes
I
sense.
say,
It's very erratic at the end. It's like
I say, in every single aspect of like these podcasts, when we get to talking about the soundtrack, it is so important in horror films and especially psychological thrillers that the music emulates what is happening on the screen, because it really carries the emotion of it. Obviously, Jack Nicholson is an amazing actor. Obviously, Shelley Duvall is an amazing actor. Obviously, Stanley Kubrick is an amazing director. But none of it could have been as intense as it was if it didn't have the soundtrack that it has.
It's what tells you what to feel.
And
really.
I will die on that hill.
Yes.
Every single time.
Please don't, but yeah.
No,
you know what I mean.
I try my best not to. If I do, then just go to the Shining Hotel and you can talk to me still.
I'm not going there.
Well, it's a real place that you can visit, actually. I don't know if people know this, but when Stephen King wrote the original novel for it, is actually because he was staying at a place called the Stanley Hotel, and he had a nightmare while he was there that he ended up killing his son. And so he woke up in the middle of the night in a huge cold sweat and actually went to his balcony. He lit a cigarette and he started writing down his nightmare, which turned into the story of The Shining.
Tough. That's what I say.
So getting back to the musical aspects of the film, one of the main places where the music is most important is actually the music that's heard inside of the Gold Room. So the ballroom where Jack meets the bartender, and where you temporarily feel for a second like he's not going crazy, actually consists of really jaunty 1920s, 1930s like era big band songs essentially. And that's just because the melodic music provides a really stark and unsettling contrast to the atonal horror score that we were just talking about for the main theming that haunts the rest of the hotel and the rest of the scenes of the dun dun dun, with the really like individual, again isolated like dissonant chords that really chime throughout the entirety of the film.
Yeah.
Just kind of, again, really pushing that isolated nature, making you feel alone and by yourself and like there's nowhere to run. It's like only one way out. But in the jaunty space of the Gold Room, obviously it contrasts this a lot, and that's because it's used to lure Jack into a false sense of nostalgia and to really give the hotel the air of like false civility. To try and make it feel to Jack like everything is still okay and everything is still normal and as it should be.
Absolutely. But one piece of non sort of horror-esque classical music features prominently, which is Schubert's Trio in E flat, which this piece is heard during the tender moments, particularly in the scene where Wendy and Jack are discussing Danny's ability. So again, like a very classical piece of music. And Kubrick specifically chose this piece despite it being composed decades after the hotel's supposed heyday, because he felt that there were no tragic love themes or 18th century music that provided, quote unquote, the right restrained balance between the tragic and the romantic. So that's a really interesting perspective. But yeah, that's some little interesting facts about the soundtrack. And obviously coming off the bat of The Shining itself, but as you can probably tell, it's a very disturbing, very unsettling film. So again, as we do on all of our Bad Blue episodes, please go and watch it. Please go and watch it. We recommend it very much so.
And if you don't want to watch it because you're too scared, then at least go and listen to the soundtrack.
Yeah, it's just something. We'll leave the link in the description to the soundtrack anyway. So as the Overlook Hotel likes to isolate its victims, so does this creature we're about to speak about in our ghostly gossip.
So, with the boot or bus section being a little bit different today, the ghostly gossip is also going to go down the same vein, as they all have to tie together pretty much with a nice little red bow on the top for you as your little Christmas present. But just to keep them all intact and all tied up, with the story that we told earlier, obviously it relates to a very specific creature who lurks in the woods and particularly comes out during the winter. And that creature is the Wendigo.
So we thought we'll kick off the festive season of the Bad Boo with a classic tale of a creature that is said to also appear during more wintry climates, which is the Wendigo. So the creature itself is a monster created when a human being violates a taboo, specifically by some of the following reasons. So cannibalism. The primary cause is resorting to eating human flesh during a period of extreme starvation, so often during harsh winters, for example. So again, during the solstice season. And also extreme greed. So the Wendigo often also embodies excessive consumption, greed, and the destruction of resources, so acting selfishly at the expense of the community. That sort of derives in and sort of hangs about, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, to my own belief, this creature does actually stem from Native American culture. However, the appearance for the creature actually slightly varies depending on the tribe that is telling its own folklore. But the most common and terrifying description usually shows a unnaturally tall, kind of up to 15 foot high, horrifyingly skeletal and emaciated, like skin stretched bone, cruel paradox of a creature with a spirit driven by hunger only. And some people say that it may have glowing eyes and sharp claws, often with long, like yellow fangs, as well as a long, like lolling tongue. And its breath is said to be really hot and putrid, but it's actually got an icy heart, which is like apparently meant to be a literal piece of ice that must be shattered or melted in order to kill the creature. Hence
Really interesting.
why games like Until Dawn, like one of the ways to kill the creature is to set it on fire. And we're actually not going to keep on saying the creature's name, because you can supposedly manifest it or call upon it by saying its name too many times.
Yes.
So if you
like
hear
the
us calling,
thing, so don't do that.
yeah. So if you hear us saying the creature, it's because we're referring to the name of the beast that we said at the start of this segment. So, yeah.
So the creature is a spirit of insatiable eternal hunger. So as it eats, it grows larger, making its hunger even greater, meaning that it can never be satisfied, essentially. And it hunts humans, and often mimics human voices or whistles to lure victims out into the deep winter woods. So again, the story that we spoke about in our Bua Buster earlier in this episode is very much one of these creatures.
Yeah, 100%. It's definitely one of these ones. With the creature, it's not actually just the creature that you are meant to be afraid of. It's actually the psychosis that can come with the creature being around, as it actually leads you into a type of mania. So this creature is very unique because it is associated with a culturally bound mental illness known as, I'm going to say blank, but it's the name of the creature, psychosis or blank mania. And this usually is a condition that involves intense anxiety, paranoia, or fear of becoming a cannibal, a perceived lack of appetite, and eventually with the delusion that the person themselves may actually be turning into the creature, and may be an eventual victim who begins to crave human flesh. Obviously this is quite rare today, as there are a lot of explanations to explain psychosis and mania. So maybe go to a doctor first before you think that you're turning into one of these creatures, because it may not be the case.
Yes, please.
But historical cases have been documented predominantly in the 19th century and the earlier 20th centuries, demonstrating that the terrifying reality of this anxiety often arose from the extreme isolation and starvation of certain colonies during the severe northern winters.
So again, it all kind of boils back down to the winter sort of solstice era, in which the dark, long, drastic winters induce these type of creatures
they
to
literally
come out.
led people into paranoia and psychosis to the point where they thought they had to eat each other.
That's lovely, tasty. So while not directly tied to winter solstice as like a exact piece of like unique winter solstice folklore, the creature's existence is sort of linked to the most severe winter conditions. So the deepest forest and blizzard conditions and frozen landscapes, these are all places where resources are scarce and isolation is absolute. And the legend served as a powerful moral warning and a crucial mechanism of social control within very sort of communal and survival-based cultures. And it enforced the sharing and generosity, warning that selfishness during times of scarcity would lead to monstrous damnation.
Ooh.
And that is the reason that this creature is part of folklore and is associated with, more so like winter times. So there we go. That is some information on that said creature. Again, we will leave a link in the description to that. But going on to some final notes about some wintry tales that perhaps this time we do recommend you actually speak aloud and read and watch. That moves us on to our final section of the podcast, which is our spooky spotlight.
As we have been doing for the past few episodes, Spooky Spotlight, we are going to be going into just a few honourable mentions for the topic of the Winter Solstice and just movies that really give you that spine-chilling feeling. Not only because they're scary, but because it is bloody freezing in the majority of them.
Yes, so kicking it off is Frozen, and you might be thinking... do
you want to build a snowman?
There we go.
Not that one.
Not this Frozen, actually the Frozen that came before, from 2010, called Frozen.
The one where they're stuck on a ski lift.
Yep.
And it's very scary, and then a big snowstorm comes, and it gets a bit graphic, and there's some wolves.
So essentially they get this bunch of people that get stuck on the ski lift, and the whole thing breaks down, and they are basically left on there. They don't realise that there's people still on it, and they are basically stuck up there because I think it's the weekend as far as I'm aware. So they know they're going to be there for like days, but it is dead cold to the point that like their fingers stick to the bars, but they can't just jump down because it's very high and they'll break their legs, which some characters do. It's also a wolf infested forest below, so they are basically screwed. But very much highly recommend it. Go and watch it.
It's a very good adrenaline junkie type film.
It is. And second to that is another absolute classic, which we have spoke about previously in other episodes, is John Carpenter's The Thing. Again, which is set in Antarctica, I believe, and involves aliens and shape-shifting aliens in a wintry setting. Again, an absolute classic. I'm not going to say much more because I don't want to spoil it, like kind of who the forms of the alien comes in. It's almost like a whodunit-esque movie, but with a really great style. So that is another one that we recommend, is The Thing. And the final film that we do recommend is a film called The Grey, which is with Liam Neeson, which is essentially he's sort of in like a plane accident, I feel, if I can remember, and he's basically abandoned. He's got to survive for himself, but there are wolves that are hunting the survivors down, and it's sort of like they've started picking people off one by one.
Ooh. Anything with Liam Neeson in it has got to have like some type of taste, Yeah. I feel like it's got to be a film of sustenance.
A tough movie.
Yes.
But yeah, that's just a few little recommendations from us. But if you've got any more wintry horror films that you think, not necessarily Christmas ones, we're not going down the Silent Night, Deadly Night route.
Although David Harbour. The
David Harbour route or anything like that. But we will come to that in later episodes this month. But let us know.
And on the topic of Liam Neeson, while he is quite the beautiful creature of an actor, speaking of a couple of unbeautiful creatures like we just did in our last segment, if you did want to learn a little bit more about the creature that starts with a W that we aren't going to name because we've said it very many times now, and we don't want to get any bad vibes or omens or
it's just bad boo
juju or anything else. You can go and actually search up a lot of stories about those particular types of creatures on TikTok and even YouTube, because there are paranormal investigators that have researched it. There are people from Native American tribes that have done videos about it, and you can find out exactly what these tales are exactly from the source. So I would highly suggest going and reading about those things, because they are really very interesting. And if you want to know what I do in my spare time, that's it. I go and look at the origins of really haunted backstories or culturally significant folklores, because I think it's really bloody cool.
It is. That's what Bad Boo's all about as well. So, and I think also there's a film called The Ritual, which some people like, some people didn't like, but I thought it was okay. I'm pretty sure it has that creature in it as like that is the villain.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, it's worth watching, I think.
I'll go and give that a go as well then.
But recommend it if you haven't seen it. It's quite interesting. But that leads us on to, unfortunately, the end of tonight's episode. So if you have shivered your way through tonight's blizzard of an episode, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for Bad Boot updates and new episodes, as there's plenty more frights, flicks and folklore to come.
You can also haunt us on socials at Bad Boo Productions, where you can interact and even leave suggestions for future episodes or contribute through polls and posts.
And if you're after more creepy content, then a Patreon is live. So if you'd like to hear and even see more of us, then head over there for exclusive Boo Crew videos, stories and live streams.
That's it from us for this biting cold episode today. We've been your haunted hosts, Sam and Jodie, unravelling the dark so that you don't have to. And until next time, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and remember, here's Johnny.